set the meeting in motion, I'm going to pass the rākau to our guest sitting at the table, which is you, Charlie Tawhio. Kei whakatūwhera tā tātou hui. Ngā mihi, Charlie. And just some housekeeping for ourselves, just to remind councillors and staff that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and that the recording will be made available on the Bapniki Regional Council website following the meeting. I also remind all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Moving on to our meeting proper, I'm calling for apologies. I currently have Chairman Leader, Councillor Nees, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Scott. Can I have a mover for those apologies, please? Thank you. Councillors. And second is Councillor McMahon. Thank you. In the public forum, there are no public forum items. Items not on the agenda, there are no items. Order of business. Agenda 8.2, interim fast track consenting process, has been withdrawn from the agenda due to direction from the ministry. Declarations, conflicts of interest. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest? We have none. Thank you. Turning to our minutes on meeting page 8, which we will attend now. Can I have a mover to move those minutes as a true and correct record, please? Thank you. Councillor White, Councillor McMillan. Thank you. Matters arising? No matters arising. All right, I'll move those as true and correct record. Those all in favour, say aye. Those against, there are none. Thank you. Carried. Now moving straight into our presentations, we have this morning we only have one presentation, so I'm banking we'll have an early finish this morning, councillors. Our first speaker, I'm sure, needs no introduction. However, I will introduce Mr. Charlie Tawhio. Charlie Tawhio is the chair of Te Runa o Ngaitarangi Iwi Trust and Ngaitarangi Settlement Trust. In his previous career, Mr. Tawhio was in public service, including as Treaty Relations Manager of the Department of Corrections with LINZ. He is a native speaker of Te Reo Māori and is well versed in tikanga. And I welcome you to our Komiti Māori meeting this morning, Charlie. Charlie is also on our Tauranga Moana Advisory Group Committee as the chair of that committee. Nō reira, nau mahaira mai te rangatira. Kei a koe.
I would prefer to stand for two reasons. One is I think it reminds me that I am holding the floor, and the longer I stand, the more I'm holding the floor and the less I'm likely to be heard. So standing reminds me of my responsibility to the speakers. But it also, I think, reminds me that every time I speak on an occasion like this, it is an honour and an obligation. And so I need to treat these opportunities with the respect they deserve. So I'm not standing to be imposing or to play any of those games. I'm standing because when I was the Treaty Relationships Manager in Corrections and I chose to speak sitting down at a hui in Ngāpuhi, I got severely growled by a queer there who said to me, "We can't see you." And she was looking straight at me. "We can't see you. Stand up." And I did. And I realised what she was really saying is, "You're disrespecting us by sitting down and talking to us as though we're sitting in your lounge." Okay, having got that done, I do want to start again. Me ki pēnei, ko mau o te maunga, ko tauranga te moana, ko ngai te rangi te iwi. You will have heard that before from various members, various people who have come to speak to you, and we will have heard that pepeha is the way they've started their kōrero. They are a way of signifying who you are, but they are also a reminder of our worldview, in which whakapapa and whanaungatanga underpin everything about what we do. It underpins everything about what we do. Now, and I think as individuals, each of you will be able to relate to that. But as representatives on a council, I think you're also bound by the obligations of your constitution, including the need to respect the customs and culture of the people whom you represent. I think whakapapa and whanaungatanga are a code for relationships. Probably the best way to put that. In my worldview as a ngaitarangi is based on whakapapa and whanaungatanga, and it all starts from there. It starts from the fact that we are all part and intertwined in a much larger picture than just us and our council and us and me and my iwi. And an example of that is how in our world we have evolved from Ranginui and Papatūānuku, which is the beginning of that relationship to nature. And I think probably something that's fascinated me recently is, and I've been talking about it a bit, is a comment I heard from Noam Chomsky a few years ago, when he said that the Abrahamic traditions, and he was talking about climate change, he said the Abrahamic traditions have not served us well when it comes to how we respect the planet. And what he was really talking about, I think, because I haven't actually had a talk to Noam Chomsky about this, and probably never will, somewhere else. But what I think he's saying is that the Abrahamic traditions posit that, and this is a very crude depiction by me, posit that God made the earth, and then God made the earth for mankind. In other words, the earth is there for mankind to exploit, to utilize, to manage, to govern, and to make plans for, and do things to. Whereas the iwi taketake and the indigenous, and this is universal across indigenous peoples across the globe, is that God made the earth and then the earth made man. It fundamentally changes the way that we think about that relationship to the environment. I'm using the term earth as a proxy for the environment. It changes the way we look at the world, because we don't feel that we own the world and are therefore in control of it, but are actually part of the world and therefore are as controlled by it as everything else in the natural environment. I think, excuse me, I think those are important distinctions to make, because the exploitative nature of owning the environment and being able to do what you like with it, if you think about it, has what's brought us to the situation we're dealing with now in terms of needing a regional council to look after the environment, when that should have been something we were all doing as a natural part of our life. I think it's where I want to start with this, because not to say there's a difference that can't be resolved, but there is a difference that can't be ignored. That's why relationships are important. If we don't have relationships, then it's not possible for those who live in the indigenous worldview to relate to relate positively to another worldview, and neither is it possible for that other worldview to relate positively to the iwi Indigenous view without that idea of relationships. And I'm a bit of an expert on relationships because I've been married for a very, very, very long time. Now, my wife doesn't like me talking about my marriage in relation to my work, but I think it's probably for me the best analogy of how I'm talking about myself and how I've navigated the world, because this is where I get into dangerous territory, because I do talk about my wife and she's not here, and she doesn't appreciate that. Well, I want to talk about the relationship with my wife. Well, for those of you who are married or who have been married or have been in a relationship with another human being, you'll be aware that most of the time it's great and sometimes it's not. And when it's not, you tend to not remember the times when it's great. But the thing that keeps relationships going, and marriages in particular, is that even when it's not going good, you know you're stuck, you're committed to each other and you're going to sort it out, even if it means not talking for 3 months as a way of sorting it out. Look, there is no perfect way to manage a relationship other than that you commit to it and you carry on with it, even when it's not working. And I think, now, this isn't to in any way indicate that I'm referring to marital difficulties between iwi and regional council. What I'm really saying is that underpins the way I look at relationships. So relationships are important because, and I'm talking about relationships generally, are important because they help us to get through the difficult times. Relationships with toi moana for tangata whenua are even more important because there's a number of reasons. One of them is there is a diversity of views amongst Māori, and I'm sure all of you in your encounters with hapu and iwi across the Bay of Plenty will have recognised that there is a diversity of views. That diversity of views is the strength of Te Ao Māori. It sounds counterintuitive, but that diversity of views is what holds everybody very close to what's considered to be the norm in our world. That diversity of views means that if we stray off too far one way or the other, the diversity of views is likely to bring us back together. But it can bring us back together because of the fact that there is a pre-existing relationship, a relationship that recognises that even when, speaking from my wife's point of view, even when I'm being a dick, I'm still the pala that she chose to marry. So she knows that either she's a dick for picking a dick, or right now he's being a dick, but he will come right. He will come right. Now, the reason I say that is because it's much more relatable to me than talking about relationships as some vague academic theory, because most of us have experienced a relationship with another human being that we've had to manage, and we do have to manage those. But let me come back to, I've got to stick to my agenda, otherwise I'll wander off. Oh, by the way, I am going to talk about two things today. One of them is the importance of relationships, and the other is to just give you a brief update on where we're at with our treaty settlement, because that's quite significant too. The relationships between iwi and toi moana are also important because we can get a lot more done to improve the health and long-term well-being of our environment by cooperating than we can by competing. And if we've got a relationship, it allows us to cooperate. And I think the idea of there being a diversity of views amongst Māori, sometimes making it difficult, is easy for you to relate to if I look around the table and realise there's quite a diversity of views at this table as well. But nobody ever thinks of this council as being so diverse in its views that it becomes dysfunctional. Sometimes some councils can become dysfunctional because of the diversity of views, and we've had some recent experience of that here in the city. But those are generally a feature of broken relationships rather than broken people. And I think we need to be able to recognize relationships as being really fundamental to us cooperating and getting things done as a society and as a community. I worked for a few years as the Department of Corrections Treaty of Waitangi Relationships Manager. And I remember when I started out on that job asking my boss, what does that mean? And he said, well, let's put it this way, if there's anything in the paper that says that the Department of Corrections has been in breach of the Treaty of Waitangi, it's your fault. And I thought, I don't know whether I want that job. But what it made me realize was that I was trying to develop a relationship in a place where there hadn't been one, but we'd been living together, cohabiting for over 100 years, 150 years. And then I started, it's like being, I don't know, it's like being around somebody and then trying to develop a relationship with them after you've known them so well that you think to yourself, do I really want a relationship with this person? Knowing them as well as I do. Whereas if we'd have started with a relationship and then I looked at it, I would have thought, okay, we've got a relationship, I can overcome the issues with that person. But coming back to that job, there was a, oh, there's someone Google. So I'm trying not to let this turn into a ramble. But where I'm getting to is that relationships work because they do. That sounds weird. They work because they do, not because something magic happened. What does happen is that people recognize that their relationship is more important than whatever the issue is that's making them grumpy with their partner. I think the issue that has impacted on our ability as Waitangi to forge a more constructive relationship with the regional council has been that the delay in our settlement. So last year it was 10 years since we initialed our deed of settlement. We have yet to conclude that. And because we haven't been able to conclude it, it means that there are some aspects of the settlement that we're not able to implement. And the one I'm speaking about in particular is the Tauranga Moana framework, which was an ambitious, and I still think, it was ambitious at the time, and it remains ambitious. An ambitious attempt to have iwi and all three councils, the regional council, the district council, and the city council, working in concert to ensure that the health of the harbour is not just maintained, but it's also improved. And in the meantime, until we get that settlement, what we have been operating under is the Tauranga Moana Advisory Group, which is a de facto body to fill the space left vacant in the meantime until we get our settlement done. And what I've observed at those council meetings, and Councillor McDonald and I are members, sorry, I can't remember who the others are. What I've observed from the councils is not only are they getting used to working with tangata whenua, they're getting used to working with each other. And I realised that the relationships at their table are not just between Tauranga Moana iwi and councils. They're also between the district council and the city council and the district council and the regional council. And so those relationships have been forming over the last 10 years as well. And one of the benefits I've found of having this interim process has been that the relationship has been able to develop naturally rather than, okay, here's it, guys, you're all married, go away and be happy. It's something that has been able to evolve over time, and relationships rarely ever start with the Big Bang. So occasionally it's love at first sight and it stays that way forever. But more often than not, it is the result of a whole lot of work of people sitting and watching each other and listening to each other and talking to each other and working out where that other is sitting. And I think the 10 years we've had with this Tauranga Moana Advisory Group has been very helpful. Look, I feel like I'm preaching to the converted because I don't think anything I'm telling any of you is new. What I needed to do, though, was to make sure that you understood that what I believe you think about what relationships are is the way we think about them and I think about them. So I'll talk about this is the way I talk about them. There isn't a big deal about this, but relationships are what makes the world work, not rules. And I know there's a strong argument for rules, not rules, not laws, not power, but relationships. That's what makes the world work. You can make the world work with power and no relationships. I think about President Putin as an example of how you use power to run a country rather than relationships. Or you can use just relationships. When I think about our former Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and then you think, well, actually relationships on their own aren't enough either. There needs to be a mix of both, but without relationships, it doesn't matter how much power or how many rules you have, nothing works. And so, just before I close, relationships are human beings connecting with each other. Human beings connecting with each other, not councillors connecting with each other, not chairman of iwi and former mayors of Tauranga City. Human beings connecting with each other to achieve a common purpose. In the case of my wife, it continues to evolve, but when we had kids, it was to have kids. And then when the kids grew up, they had kids, and then it was, okay, now I know why I've got kids, so they can give me mokopunas. It's that whole idea of we are moving towards something that we can do better together, and being a koro and having mokopunas works a hell of a lot better when I've got a wife beside me than I can't imagine it working without having a wife beside me. So there's a good reason for me to hang on to the wife, even though she thinks I'm a dick. Sometimes she thinks I'm a dick. Look, what I'm saying here is that I haven't got any magic. I haven't got any pills of wisdom, Stuart, sorry. All I can do is repeat what you already know and assure you that it is no different from the way we look at it. But I do think it's important to understand the basic underpinnings of the way I see the whole world is through whakapapa and whanaungatanga. It's through our relationships, not just with each other, but with our environment, with the universe, with the whole shebang, really. And so, look, I'm going to leave that at that. I feel a little bit of a fake Mate Moana. I know that you and Kataraina had huge ambitions for me to come along and talk about relationships, like I had some secret secret formula. And I have to admit, I'm sitting there thinking, shit, I must know something about this, otherwise they wouldn't have asked me. And for the last 2 weeks, I've been thinking about that, and I realise I don't. My wife still thinks I'm a dick, and that's my measure. That's my measure. My wife still thinks I'm a dick, and she said so this morning. You're a dick. Go to work. You know, and in spite of that, we're going to be married for another 100 years because of the relationship that allows her to call me a dick and for me to get over it and get on with it and realise that that's today. I'm not suggesting, by the way, that we start calling each other names as a way of cementing our relationship. That's just what works for her and I. What we've all got to do is work out what works for each of us. Not just for each of us as council iwi, but Stuart and Taru, all of you. How does that work for each of us? and does it work, and does it matter? Okay, enough about that. If you've got any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them if I can. But look, before I sit down, I just want to update you on where we're at with our treaty settlement. As I said, we initialed our settlement in 2013, and our expectation is that after working our way through a few final details, we would get it done, and we'd had the first reading of our bill in the House, and we thought we'll get through this. The final details started turning into a much more complex set of arrangements than we had envisaged or even been alerted to by the government at the time. And those final details ended up with us being required to accept the presence of a number of other iwi and tauranga moana, when we had never ever contemplated them as having a place here. And bearing in mind that iwi is about place. Hapu and iwi are about place. Hapu and iwi don't exist without place. And so place is important. And so as a consequence of the incursions from external iwi grouping, there were incursions into what we understand to be our mana whenua, our authority, our cultural and political authority and economic authority in our place. And this other iwi was being invited, in our view, by the Crown to participate alongside us. We objected to that, we continue to object to that, and we are working our way through it. The first minister who worked with us on it was Minister Finlayson under the previous national government. He was probably the most knowledgeable man we have in government and have had in government prior, since Doug Graham, I think, who understood the dynamic and the need to work through these settlements. Unfortunately, he and I were not able to find a solution because there is a third party, of course, and that's the other iwi. And then we had Minister Andrew Little under the last government. He found it even more difficult because he was coming in cold. He didn't have the long history of treaty settlements that Chris Finlayson did. And we've now got Minister Goldsmith, who is the new minister, and he's got even, relative to those two, even a shorter kind of time frame in government and in treaty settlements. But we have a rule, a very clear rule in Waitarangi. Whoever is the government is the government. Whoever is the council is the council. There's no point in sitting around complaining about who the government is. And so whoever's the government is the government, and Minister Goldsmith is now the minister we'll be dealing with. We've got a meeting, he's agreed to meet with us in a couple of weeks' time, and we will once again put to him our solution to the problem and see whether he's got an appetite for it. And our solution to the problem, for those of you who are interested, our solution to the problem is the settlements are this big. The issues that we're contesting are this big. And in order to solve these little things, these small, to us, minor issues, the whole of both of our settlements has been impacted. And so what we're saying to this minister, as we have said to the previous two ministers, look, 90% of the settlement can be completed without any problem. The 10% that can't be completed can be set aside and left for us, that is us and the other contesting iwi, to resolve amongst ourselves in our own time. Now, it sounds really sensible because it allows both of us to get on with the major job we've got to do while we work through the intricacies of solving this relationship problem. And it is a relationship problem we have with this other iwi. Simple as that. It is a relationship problem, and we need time to work through that. Both ministers said to me, what happens if you can't settle? What happens if you can't resolve it? And the obvious answer to that is the only people who will be disadvantaged by that not happening is us. And so what's the problem? If we can't solve it, then we have to live with that problem. Nobody else does. That's not quite true, but in general, nobody else has to live with it. It has come, that solution has not been accepted by previous governments, I think, because there is a preference to make all settlements complete, full and final. In other words, wrap it all up in a nice tidy package and then put it over there and it's done. Whereas what we're proposing is most of it gets done, but there's a little bit that's still not to be done. Now, governments are saying, and both governments have said this to us, no, we can't do that. Our policy is all settlements need to be full and final. And then we say, well, hang on. That hasn't always been the case. There have been cases where bits and pieces of settlements are left to be dealt with at a later stage. The most obvious one being Tainui Waikato and the river. There are others. So what we're trying to work out is, and we're going to have a talk to Minister Goldsmith along the same lines. Here's the solution. We think it's an elegant solution. What it needs is for you to say that that'll be what's been done. So that's where our settlement is at. In the meantime, we are acting as though we're settled to the extent we can. There are some things we can't do because we need the settlement legislation to endorse. Otherwise, we're just proceeding and acting as though we are settled. So that's me, Madam Chair, and I'm going to sit down now because I can answer questions. Yoda.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm going to open up to the floor now, and we'll start with Councillor White, Councillor McMillan.
Tēnā tātou, e tua ki tēnei ki te whakahoki, te whakaute ki a koe e te rangatira maitarangi, e te rangatira Charlie. A kei te mea ki a koe mo tō mihi, mo tō whakaro ki a mātou i tēnei rā, ki te mihi. Yeah, look, just in terms of your notions of relationships, to me they're very wise words in the context of whakapapa and whanaungatanga, you know, our creation stories. And I really have spoken to this several times before around the relationship between heaven and earth, Papatuanuku, Ranginui and Te Ao Marama, the world in which we live, in which all balance is created, reciprocity is maintained, duopoly of respect and regard for all things, both humankind and non-humankind. So it's the nature of that relationship. And the whakapapa is obviously related to the po and tāne, tangaro, and all the others that are in that particular space. So I tend to think in that particular situation when it comes to relationship about respect, reciprocity, what you take, so you give back. So it's balance. So in the context of being sitting around this council table, it is a question of balance. It is a question of diversity here, and we do have diverse views around this table, diverse, past histories, and that relationship you refer to, it is about having difficult times, at the same time having that ability to navigate and advocate and negotiate and arbitrate and come to some arrangement. You know, I would say that this council is not too bad at that, and there are others that have failed miserably and therefore have suffered the consequences of that. So I just wanted to start there. In the context of your issues around a treaty, well, by the way, is your wife online listening to your conversation?
She knows everything I say. I don't know how.
Yeah. It might be a capital D when you get home. But anyway, look, in terms of the treaty settlement, you know, I applaud where you're at. You know, the challenge is 90% settled, 10% still to be done, and you're taking the responsibilities for that. I also acknowledge the previous ministers, Doug Graham. You know, I back in my day in the mid-90s led out the consultation round on the fiscal envelope with Witter and Doug Graham, and how difficult that was around people disagreeing wholeheartedly on that space. And now we have over 70 settlements done, for better or for worse. You know, and that experience of those ministers like Doug Graham and Finlayson is really, really a critical aspect to hopefully settling what you guys are into it right now. So hopefully Minister Goldsmith can pick up on that tone. But hey, look, I just wanted to make those comments to wish you well, Charlie. I know you do a heck of a lot of work representing your people, and it's not always easy in the dynamic of space that is iwi. And for us, it's a relatively dynamic space around this table as well, as we wrestle with issues that come with our different perspectives. But look, I just wanted to acknowledge you, Charlie, for your words. And yeah, it wasn't a ramble. I mean, you can, I take it from me, it wasn't a ramble. To some, it might seem like a scramble, but it wasn't a ramble. You were pulling together words that are very deep and incisive in terms of what relationships really mean. And something that as a council, and I hope in our debates and deliberations, we can carry the notion of those words through to making some really great decisions for all of us, for Māori, non-Māori, for community, for all of us, because we live in that world where we have to come to arrangements in an increasingly international dynamic that is not looking favourable, given what I heard at a previous meeting, and I won't divulge that, but a previous meeting we had earlier today. And as we face all sorts of international conflicts, and not only that, how it impacts upon our world and how we must be very, very focused on how we work this relationship in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So Charlie, ngā mihi ki a koe e te rangatira. Not a question, just a comment of appreciation. Kia ora hoa.
Tēnā koe, nā mihi nui ki a koe I te rangatira, Charlie. Tautakaua ho o tō kōrero about the relationships, karawe. I suppose my question is, what can we do better? And then when I say we, I'm not actually really talking about Toi Moana. I'm talking about me as an elected member, Pākehā elected member in Tauranga Moana. I want to do the best I can in my time in terms of our relationships with our iwi. So have you got any advice for me?
I'll start by saying, and seeing Kataraina up on the screen remind me, I did work for the regional council when I left government, and I appreciated the fact that Kataraina took a punt on me because I'd had no experience in the field that she was bringing me into. But one of the things that struck me coming out of Wellington was the tone that was used by all council staff when talking about councillors, relative to the tone used by the public servants I worked with when they were talking about ministers. And I have to say that the relationships I encountered in my time with Kataraina at regional council were far more positive internally than they were when I was working government. There just didn't seem to be the same sense of competition between officials and ministers, as there is. In fact, the relationship between council staff and councillors in the time that I observed was really, really constructive. I think there are a couple of things, and thank you for your question. I think there are a couple of things that spring immediately to mind. One of them is you are voted in by people who expect you to represent their view. And they expect you to represent their view in a way that is inclusive of the communities that you represent, not just the voters that voted for you, but the communities that you represent. And in terms of what could you do better? I think we can always do better when it comes to relationships, because no matter how much we try, there's always going to be that lingering doubt in the minds of somebody who's wondering whether or not, is he really just a dick? Or is this a genuine mistake? You know, there's that human element and it is about humans' relationships, not about officials' relationships or councillors' relationships, or even relationships between roles. Fundamentally, relationships are human being interactions. What could you do better? I think probably it's the thing that I'm trying to do, is measure the quality of how I manage the relationships I need to in my professional life by how effectively I measure by how effectively I manage the relationships in my personal life, because my personal life relationships have much more immediate feedback. Whereas your professional relationships, the feedback doesn't always come immediately. You aren't always going to be told, sit down, you're talking too much, or stand up when you speak. You aren't always going to get that feedback immediately. Whereas in more personal relationships, in more private relationships, you do depend on that feedback. I think if there was one thing that I would be recommending, and bear in mind, I'm still working my way through my own relationships. So it is, I think the thing I would be doing would be listening harder to what other people are saying. And in my case, the people in my life are saying to me, listening harder for what it is they are trying to say, rather than what I think they're saying and what I'm going to say back to them in response. It's a tricky line to tread, really, because each of you has been elected for a very specific set of skills you have, and you bring those skills to the table. And the last thing you want to do is then say, well, let's chuck all that, what I do know, let's chuck all that out and start again. So it's really building on what got you to the table. And it will be your ability to manage relationships. Because let's face it, if you don't have relationships with anybody, who's going to vote for you for a start? If you're not seen as relatable, how did you even get to this table? So the fact that you're at this table means that you have already indicated the ability to be relatable and to relate. And so what would I do? What could we do better? I can't think of any one thing other than to presume that every relationship you have is a work in progress and just keep working on it. Sorry, I know you're looking for a more explicit and specific response, but I think every relationship is a work in progress, and it has to be that, seen as that, rather than a destination. It's just a continuing and ongoing conversation.
Kia ora. Councillor Winters.
Kia ora, Charlie. Your analogy or your reference to Ngaitarangi's settlement reminded me of when I was Mayor of Rotorua some time ago. It was the Central North Island iwi collective settlement, and it was a huge settlement, and they were 90% there, like your Ngaitarangi. But it was the other 10% that we couldn't get across the line. And Sir Michael Cullen at the time said, all right, I've had enough of this. Here are all the parcels of land, the whole collective. And there were about 12 iwi, including Tūhoi. There was Kaingaro Forest. There was a massive tracts of land. This is in the mix. There was a huge fiscal envelope. I'm going to give it to the Central North Island iwi collective. That's the settlement done as far as the Crown's concerned. And over the next 3 years or however long it takes, you guys, the mana whenua, are going to sort out the different parcels of land that is going to go to different ownerships. And I thought that was clever of Sir Michael Cullen to do that, because it got across the line and then sort out the minor detail, the 10% that you couldn't sort out, the Crown couldn't sort out, because they'll never sort it out. And it was up to the mana whenua at the time at the table to sort it out. And they've slowly, through that settlement process, have sorted out the tracts of land that were given back to the Central North Island iwi collective. So it might be a little lesson for Ngaitarangi going forward. Let's just get it over the line, and the minor details we can do in amongst ourselves. So just a bit of history lesson there.
Yeah, well, and definitely the CNI settlement was one of the things we looked at in terms of the processes they used. Ken Mayer, I think, was involved in some of the mediation processes, and he spoke to me about the methods they were using. And we did try that in the early stages. For a number of reasons, it didn't quite get through. But the primary problem, and it would be the same for the CNI, was the government's need to settle in order to achieve something else. They needed to have it done so they could do what they had in mind. That situation doesn't apply to the same extent to us. Other than that, in fact, the delays in settlement are causing us iwi more of a problem than they are government, which is possibly why there hasn't been as much of a pressure to conclude it. I don't think any treaty negotiations minister likes having unfinished business, and I don't think that they, any of them, appreciate having a relatively small iwi in Bay of Plenty taking up so much of their energy when they are looking to solve much bigger problems as they have got up in Northland. But no, you're right. What we're proposing isn't new. It isn't novel, or it just seemed to us to make common sense. Hopefully, this government has started out with a much more pragmatic bent, I'd say, would be the way to put it. And hopefully they will have a more pragmatic view on how we can get this done. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Charlie around the table? No, we don't appear to. But Charlie, I do want to thank you for coming today. You questioned whether you were giving us pearls of wisdom. I want to confirm you have offered us pearls of wisdom, as Te Taru has alluded to. But I also want to mihi to you and to make councillors aware of your own dedication that you've made to Tauranga Moana, and not just Ngaitarangi, but all of the three iwi. I often am amazed of how you have stood the test of time through this turbulent period, from the time that our claims were partially settled and are still doing it. I remember when we both entered the fray around treaty negotiations, whether we've aged gracefully in that time, the jury is certainly out on that one, but we've certainly aged over the 10 years, I'm sure. But I want to mihi to you for that. The other thing I want to raise about is your terminology when you refer to your marriage as the analogy. And I'm sure the term that wife uses on you is actually a term of endearment.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I'm sure there is no malice in that terminology. But again, thank you. And, whether the councillors are aware really of the position that you do actually hold in Tauranga Moana, and the privilege we've had here today of having you sitting around this table and sharing your views, as all too often we struggle sometimes with understanding and coming to terms of what we're facing ourselves with our relationship, and particularly relationships here in Tauranga Moana, as you know, is always a cauldron, I want to say, and to me, to you, for navigating through a lot of what happens in Tauranga Moana and those hard issues that we still continue to face, and your ability to ride the waves in that space. They are certainly, in my view, a lot more difficult sometimes than dealing with what we have around this table, because one, they are our people, and all too often, really, the criticism that we have to take is often a lot more difficult to take when the criticism are coming from your own. So I want to mihi to you, and I hope that the settlements do come to some finality, although like you, it may not be in our lifetime. But I guess the thing that we do have is that we have got a very capable next generation coming through. So what I feel that what we don't resolve in our generation will certainly be resolved in the next generation. So, you know, thank you for coming today and sharing your whakaaro around what we will continue to do about building relationships. Ngā mihi kia koe.
Thank you, Mate Moana. Look, if I could just have a couple more minutes. First of all, I've got to get this solved in my lifetime because I've been on the board. I've been chair for a long time. And when I started, and the board's getting younger, or I'm getting older. When I did say to the board, look, maybe it's time for me to move on, they said, no, you stay here until you sort this out. This happened on your watch, you need to fix it. So I can't afford to leave it to the next generation. But look, the other thing is, one of the issues that's in our way is the view of the other iwi, that their interests, which have been affirmed by the Waitangi Tribunal, their interests in Tauranga Moana, which have been confirmed by the Waitangi Tribunal, equate to our rights as mana whenua here. And so I was characterising it as a contest between interests and rights. Now, the people we're dealing with is led by a lawyer, and for him, interests and rights are pretty well the same thing, or they're parts of the same puzzle. Whereas from our perspective, interests are just that, our interests, and rights are much harder. Anyway, I was at home and I was talking to the whānau about it and ruining the fact that I couldn't express and explain clearly enough what that difference was in my view. And our eldest daughter, who happened to be home at the time, said, "Oh, Dad, it's easy. When another woman looks at you, she's interested, but only Mum's got the right." See, and I thought, okay, yeah, it's probably an analogy that would make sense to people as a distinction between rights and interests. So I started using that in fora like this. And then my wife found out about it, as she does. And she said, "What makes you think that other women are actually interested in you? And don't you think that's been a bit, up yourself?" And I said, "Look, it's an analogy. It's not real." And fortunately, our relationship allowed me to be able to talk my way through that and out. I could see some other husbands who are seeing that I'm pretending to have it under control too. But look, the point I'm making is that we'll just keep going and doing our best. And I'd just like to close. There's a poster above my desk, and it's a picture of Maya Angelou, or Angelou Maya. I can't remember which way around it goes. And she says, do your best with what you know. And then when you know better, do better. And I think that's all I can do, is do my best with what I know. And then when I know better, I can do better. Yeah. I've just got to convince my wife that that's the work in progress that she's living with. Gilda.
Thank you, Charlie. Councillors, we're going to break for morning tea now, so we can invite Charlie. I'd like to invite you to morning tea to join the councillors. The councillors may want to have some informal chat with you during morning tea. So we'll break now for morning tea and be back in... I'll wait for the boss to tell me. 10:45. We'll be back at 10:45. Thank you. Kia ora koutou, everybody. We'll now reconvene. Kia ora koutou, everybody. We'll now reconvene our meeting. Our next speaker, I'll hand over to Herewini to introduce our next speaker. Kia koe.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and tēnā koutou te tēpū. So on behalf of the General Manager Strategic Engagement, Kataraina, I'm here to present this report or introduce this report around the long-term plan, a proposal around one of the venues for one of the LTP hearings. As Council will recall, in December, as the table will recall, Komiti Māori endorsed in December the LTP Māori Consultation and Communication Plan, which set out a number of initiatives towards the enhanced participation, or hopefully enhanced participation of tangata whenua as part of our LTP process. As a continuation of that, one of the proposals we're talking to today is around holding one of the 3 LTP hearings on a marae. And so we have today Mirihine Waiari, who has been leading the consultation, the Māori engagement plan, alongside the LTP and engagement team. So I'll hand over to Mirihine. Kia ora.
Ngā mihi Herewini, tēnei te mihi kia koutou, kua tau mai nei tēnei ata. I have a short presentation today that will provide a brief update to the committee on the consultation plan that was approved in December, and will also touch on the key points in support of the recommendation to hold a long-term plan hearing on the marae in May. If there are any questions from the councillors, I'm happy to answer those at the end of the presentation. Just bear with me for a minute, just sorting out the presentation. Kia ora, the next one. Thank you. So over the past 2 weeks, we've been presenting to some of our co-governance entities on the long-term plan consultation, and we've also been highlighting our new proposed strategic direction and the dedicated community outcome Te Arapautama. Our council has acknowledged that we've developed this long-term plan during a period of change. There's been a change to central government and to our current economic climate, but there hasn't been a change to our ongoing commitment to partnerships with Māori. And it's really important that we highlight that when we're consulting with iwi and hapu. We've achieved a lot of really good mahi with tangata whenua since our last LTP. And this ongoing commitment to partnerships, it's reflected in the new goals that we've set under Te Arapautama. Te Arapautama also provides the rationale for supporting a long-term plan hearing at the marae. What are we doing for tangata whenua to enhance their participation in council decision-making and in the long-term plan process? So where we're at in terms of the development of the long-term plan, we're currently preparing for consultation with tangata whenua that begins on Friday the 8th of March. We've sent out invitations to iwi leaders, some hapu leaders and co-governance entities, and we've scheduled one-on-one hui with our Māori councillors in the first 2 weeks of consultation. We're also continuing to present to our co-governance entities on the long-term plan and the key kaupapa Māori initiatives within the long-term plan. We're also holding 3 lunchtime online hui that focus on the key kaupapa Māori initiatives and activities in each of the 3 Māori constituencies, Mauao, Okure and Kohi. These hui will be facilitated by our Māori councillors and supported by senior staff. There'll also be an opportunity for tangata whenua to answer questions at the end of those sessions. So today we're seeking support from Komiti Māori to hold a long-term plan hearing on the marae in May, one of the 4 long-term plan hearings that are scheduled, and this would be the first one that would be held on the 10th of May. This is an opportunity for Toi Moana to enhance Māori participation and the Māori experience in the long-term plan hearings, and it also supports the 4 goals under Te Arapautama. Some of the key opportunities that we've identified for holding a hearing on the marae. The marae is a culturally appropriate forum to promote Māori engagement and participation in the long-term plan decision-making process. We also acknowledge the value that iwi and hapu afford to marae. The submitters won't be constrained by the tight time slots, although they will be supported by senior staff to make sure that their time is managed effectively and tikanga Māori is promoted and respected. A long-term plan hearing on the marae, it is a new consideration for Toi Moana, but it's something that we have experience and expertise in, having held multiple hui on marae previously. In the past, we've had a plan change hearing for the regional policy statement at Whakaue Marae. We've held resource consent hearings at a marae Maketu and also at Whareroa Marae. That was a recent resource consent hearing, and every second committee Māori hui is held at the marae also. Where it's been appropriate for us to conduct council hui at the marae, we've always had greater participation by tangata whenua, and the conversations have been more robust. And this is in line with the marae being the forum for iwi Māori to wānanga important kaupapa. When we have held council hui at the marae also, we've always received positive feedback about council's commitment to acknowledging the importance of the marae for tangata whenua. Komiti Māori does approve this recommendation. Staff will confirm the date and the suitable marae venue for the hearing in consultation with the Chair of Komiti Māori. Are there any pātai from the councillors on this recommendation?
I just want to say I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you for that. One of my experiences has been to come into a council chamber for anybody is quite intimidating. I know even when I was mayor and I'd go and talk to some other councils in their chamber, it was at times intimidating. So I think we need to take every step we can to make sure that our engagement and consultation is accessible and as friendly as possible. Because when you walk in here and you see a layout like this, and you're in the front, often not experienced in talking in a public realm, it is really, really hard. So to me, it's not just, I do support the recommendation, but it's not just around a marae. I'd be interested in where our other three are going to be. I haven't heard yet, but I'm assuming it'll maybe one in Rotorua, one in Whakatane, and one here, I don't know. But we must take every endeavour to make it as user-friendly as possible, which then encourages participation, because of the big risk in an LTP or any process is that people don't get engaged, they don't get involved, and it's really hard then for elected members to gauge the pros and cons of a particular issue. So yeah, absolutely support this, and also on a wider brief around how we engage on the LTP and where we engage as well.
Yes, I totally support this as well. I do have a question around it. Just come from a workshop, and there was 20, 30 stakeholders there, and there was a Q&A bit. And the first couple of people asked a question, and took about 30 seconds to ask the question. The next person took about, I don't know, best part of an hour, it seemed. But it was a very long comment. And I'm just interested in your little comment about not being time constrained, and just how that gets managed. One, to be fair to all the people who at other hearings will be time constrained, but also to the people at that hearing who might be waiting for their turn. And how does that get managed to make sure it's fair and equitable?
Through you, Chair. So if we do hold hearings on the marae, there will be general kind of rough time allocated spots, but how discussions generally go on the marae is when participants know there are a number of speakers and there's a limited amount of time, each presenter or whai kōrero, they will manage their time to ensure that each other member after them has sufficient amount of time to speak. And that's just a tikanga process that we observe when we're on the marae. We would expect no different with our LTP hearing, but we will have staff there if somebody is to speak more than they take up someone else's time, where we can encourage them to round off their submission to allow time for the other presenters.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support the recommendation. I think the proposals here for enhanced Māori participation is ideal and fully supported. The issue, I think, though, for me is some of the content of what we've got in the LTP, and specifically, the elephant in the room in terms of the emphasis on co-governance and partnership. And it's as a nation, we're entering quite a debate on those topics, and we're not quite sure where it's going to land. I think at this stage it's a very important discussion for this nation to have. But where are we positioning ourselves in terms of creating expectations in terms of co-governance? Certainly we have the treaty settlements, which are quite clear and sort of delegated management, no issue there. But are we perhaps creating an expectation that ahead of time, when we're not sure where we're going with these very big, meaningful concepts from a constitutional point of view? I know that's not an easy question, but I just sort of, to perhaps ease my mind, I'm just trying to be sure that while the process is great, in the content, are we not possibly creating expectations that we might not be able to fulfil?
Maybe I can take this one for the staff, Madam Chair. In my view, outside of the statutory co-governance, which has come under the various settlement acts, like the Rangataki River Forum and the Kaituna, we have the Ohiwa Harbour Implementation Forum, which is a co-governance forum. When we had Chris Finlayson here, and he was like, maybe it's a misdemeanor to call it co-governance, it's co-management. I think in our functions that we perform in this region, that's largely our involvement with iwi when it comes to co-governance, is the sharing or the partnership in the management of resources. So I don't think, Madam Chair, there's too much danger of us entering into agreements that we couldn't uphold while the nation has this discussion. But I certainly think this organisation has also established that our view is that we are in partnerships with iwi. We've been stating that for some time. I think until we are explicitly told that we cannot enter into partnerships, and I would, I guess, dare any government to tell us what we can and can't do in terms of our partnerships. But we have had that position for a while, so I don't see us necessarily changing our path in that, Madam Chair.
Yeah, kia ora, Madam Chair, just in support of what Councillor Iti has said. I think I made the comment that, central government, we're aware of what they're doing and what they're saying. They'll impart the policies and give us direction on those policies. But in the terms of relating to our communities of interest, be that iwi, be the community, that's for us to decide how we do that and how we approach it. And I guess I just want to hark on what Charlie presented to us this morning around relationships. It's mutual respect. It's work in progress. And if we continue down the path that's been suggested by our team here in Toi Moana, it's a pathway to building that respect. Because if you go on a marae and you show that your palms are open to the conversation, then respect is and reciprocity is immediately given. And then that opens the door for really sound conversations and robust conversations, rather than trying to, dissect notions of co-governance and notions of partnership. Partnership is an expression of relationship and how the people feel when you're working and talking to them. So I don't have any great expectations of what the outcome might be, that we're going to raise, unnecessary expectations. I'm very comfortable that we'll get them, saying and being open about what they feel. And I guess it's a matter of respect of how we work that space back the other way, so that there is a reciprocity happening here, that people are listening to each other, talking to each other rather than at each other. And when it comes down to the timeframes that people speak, for example, there is a process that is inherent in the marae that, hey, you're talking too long. You know, it's about time you pass the rako over to the next person. You know, I know that some people can go on, but there is an inherent way of dealing with it, and it's just being respectful. And when I say just being respectful, it comes down to relationships. And I think Charlie articulated that very, very well. You call it what you want. It's how we relate to the people on the ground, be that community, be that iwi, and how we get the reciprocity moving back the other way. So I have no concerns. I know you've raised some, Councillor Shirley, around, you know, the government expectations, but I'm just saying, what are our expectations as people who live here, reside here, and care about our communities of interest, as we should. That's just my view.
Just really supporting the kōrero of the previous two councillors. The other thing I want to express is that I don't think in Hiara Potama we specifically cover co-governance in that, which will be the basis of our conversation with tangata whenua. Should, I think, it be raised in those conversations during our consultation process, you basically heard our whakaaro. And the other thing I want to express, and taking on into account what Charlie had expressed, is that for Māori, even if co-governance ceases to happen, it won't be a showstopper for Māori. As Charlie would express, we will continue on the journey that Māori will take. So we're aware that there could be changes around how central government may specify what co-governance should be. But I think for us as a council and our relations with Māori, I think the strength of our partnership that's being described in Te Ara Potami sets the scene, I think, for how we can still move forward if government brings in drastic changes of terminology of co-governance. Whether we're answering your question or not.
Yes, I just sort of sense that it is a potential issue, and I think it's in the way we use the language and phrase the terms of our communications with all stakeholders. I think shared management's fine, and really that's what the point was made with the treaty settlements. It's a delegated management, which is totally appropriate. I'm a great believer in bottom-up communities controlling their own destinies, supported by institutes of governance. But the term co-governance has sort of becoming a bit of a lightning rod, because you go, it's a continuum to co-sovereignty. Co-governance is the next step, and that's where the country's already at, is the discussion of co-sovereignty. And that's when we get into some real constitutional issues.
I think the other thing we should point out here is in our current co-governance regime that we operate within regional council alongside tangata whenua, is at the end of the day, because I question whether it is co-governance from the respect of tangata whenua's position, and that basically at the end of the day, regional council still retains the power for that final decision. So even I sometimes question, well, is it co-governance or is it really co-management? So, I guess councillors and a regional council can still sit with ease that at the end of the day, it does have final decision-making around what occurs in those co-governance bodies that we've set up, that have been set up by us to administer. Have we got any other questions for Merehine? Okay, we don't appear to. We do have a mover and seconder for this motion. So all those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Those against? So thank you. Motion is carried. Thank you, Merehine. Final report. So I will hand over to Herewini again to give the chair's report. Kia koe, Herewini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is our regular Chair's report, which is an omnibus of a lot of different things happening within Council and also on the national radar that are of particular interest to tangata whenua. With your indulgence, I'll just highlight a couple of key points. I've just picking up on the point around partnerships, as councillors may recall from our existing strategic priority around Māori partnerships, we outlined a bit of a spectrum and where different opportunities sit to partner with tangata whenua. So within this report here, there are a couple of different items, a couple of different examples of those at point 2, 3.2 and 5. So the opportunities, some of them are looking at opportunities to partner within existing operations. So that's the mana whakahono. So that's a statutory regime that looks for opportunities for us to work with hapu in that instance around some of our existing consent compliance operations. Again, at 3.2, there's a project that we have supported collaboratively with the Ministry for the Environment to support tangata whenua in that freshwater space. And then finally at point 5, the environmental hub is an example of a different type of partnership at the sort of higher or mid end of the scale. So it's just to draw your attention to councillors that we do have examples of partnerships, not necessarily at that higher co-governance end, but at different points along that partnership spectrum that we are doing already that just fit within our existing operations. And then finally, with your indulgence, Madam Chair, kaupapa number four, is our summer student experience program. So as councillors may recall, each year council takes on a number of summer assistants or summer students. It's both around providing them as members of our regional community an opportunity to come in and see what we do, but also to provide them a bit of a springboard for those coming out of university to get a bit of experience so that it can springboard into roles in that later stage of that early stage of their career. So we've got a couple of our students here today who have been worked within our Te Amorangi, our Māori policy team, as well as the freshwater space. So we have Caden Tuck at the back who's be speaking in person, as well as Patricia Waugh, who's prepared a video, and Momoi Waka Dunster, who will be presenting online. So, kia ora, Caden.
Kia ora, Hiriwini, and thank you to the chair and the councillors for allowing some time for us to speak. Ko Caden Tuck tuku ingoa no te rā o Papamoa Ahau. I am one of the 3 Te Amorangi students, and I am mainly focused in the freshwater space, environmental strategy. Some of you probably seen my face a few times back in Katikati at the last Komiti Māori, and maybe close to a year ago now at Eromoko Marae. For me personally, I'm a Tauranga boy through and through. I just live over the harbour there at the base of the Papamoa Hills. And unlike a lot of my friends at school, I stayed here for my university studies. It was good timing that I could go to the Waikato University campus just here in Tauranga, where I decided to do a sociology degree, mainly because here's where my analogies start, when my tree of education and knowledge starts, a lot of people nowadays want to get their roots in quite deep in a specific field. I don't know, something like some fancy surgeries and stuff, doctorates and all that, where I thought sociology would give me a nice route to my tree of education, where I studied a lot of things: history, economics, Indigenous theory, philosophy, criminology, geography. It really allowed me to kind of achieve something that I think I pride myself in, which is holding conversations with anybody at anywhere. And with my work here at Toi Moana, I really got to let that excel. When I was asked the broad question of my highlights here, it would probably be the analogy I thought in my head was jumping into the deep end. I don't want to make that sound too harsh. I wasn't jumping into, the Cook Strait or the Tasman Sea. I was probably more like the kids pool at Bay Wave, where I had a great team, the Te Amarangi team around me that were kind of my lifeguards, and they allowed me to swim in the pool of Toi Moana and let me experience this career avenue my own way. Let me get my feet wet, really. And if I needed help, they would be there on the sidelines to tell me basically how to swim. And they've been doing a great job for me, which has helped build my confidence as well, obviously. I would say what describes the deep end for me would be Te coming from university, going straight into a team that can, fully hold conversations all day in Te Reo. Kind of kicks me up the bum to learn quicker and try to converse as much as I can. Community engagement, it's always good to be on the end of the community engagement and not where I previously was, which was sitting outside the building looking in. Now I'm inside the building looking out at all the perspectives that everyone at Toi Moana has to kind of digest when they get community feedback. And also, a little side note, is all the history and the knowledge that everyone in the building and my team holds is great to listen to at lunchtime or maybe when at the end of the day on a Friday. It's just awesome being able to further connect myself with especially tauranga, especially Papamoa if I can, where eventually, as I grow my holistic perspectives, I can, when I talk, you hear tauranga in me, you hear Mowal and the history here, Marina, Battle of Gay Pa, all that. And then literally being thrown in the deep end, I had to jump in the Okere Falls for a water safety course that I did at my own will. And there's nothing like the thrill or the drive to get out of water when 200 meters downstream is the raging falls of Kaituna River, and the safety instructor being like, "I'll jump in to try help you, but it gets pretty nasty down there." So that was an extremely fun and, more importantly, confidence growing course for me as well, in particular. And that's basically that's kind of what's formed Caden Tuck at Toi Moana. I'm obviously excited to hear any questions either in the chambers or if you see me at Kmart or something. I love to kōrero because I find that that's the best way to gain knowledge is with the people that hold the knowledge. Kia ora.
Thank you, Caden. Any questions from the councillors? Councillor White, Councillor McMillan.
Kia ora, Caden. Mihana ki a koe mo tō kōrero mo tō whakaaro pai kia mātou I tēnei rā. Hey, I just want to comment that, you mentioned the word holistic, and I think you've embraced that pretty well in your presentation that you've done, positioning your sociology studies in the context of your experience with the Te Amorangi team, and by osmosis and just connection, you're finding some real value and reciprocity in that space. And I think that's great. We can talk about academia and environmental issues and things like that, which we've heard a lot of good stories around that space. But what I like to hear from students as well is how they've internally embraced the values that they're learning or experiencing by exchange and communication with others. We talked about relationships. I think you are a next generation epitomizing what that really means from an individual perspective, but it only comes from your ability to work with others. So I applaud that, and it's refreshing to hear that perspective from one of our students. It isn't so much about how much the noxious weeds you're pulling out of the ground, but being able to address the sort of any sort of sense of noxious weeds inside yourself, and being able to just unhitch those from your thinking and be very open about your feelings. I like that. So just I'm here to you for that, my friend, and all the best.
E mihi ana ki a koe, Caden. We've met a number of times now, which has been awesome. My question to you is, have you thought about going into a career in politics? And there are some elections coming up in July this year in Tauranga. Just wondering, what your thoughts, because your korero, it just shows me that you've got this lifelong learning thing going on, but also this, as you describe with the roots, like this grounded approach to your understanding of the world, but of Tauranga, of Te Tao. Yeah, politics needs people like you. So that's my question.
That's a good question. I know that the first thing my politics lecturer said to me way back when was, you'll hate politics, but you will know it's needed, or something along those lines. And that is something I've been battling with for many years now. I'm sure you guys all have experienced it. It can be quite a murky waters to travel through. But sometimes you need to travel through those murky waters to get to dry land or something. I haven't expressed myself in politics at all, really. I wouldn't really know where to start. I do have concerns that probably more lean towards the younger generations, like the wave of the internet and rapid technology and all that, which is a task that needs to be tackled by experienced leaders and a cohort of young minds that have, I guess, experienced firsthand what the first wave of the internet and stuff does. But yeah, I could go on for hours about many fields that I'm quite a keen interest in and have experience in. I like to say that, especially in terms of Tauranga, maybe area and politics. I used to say that I've been here for 24 years, but then my older mates at parties would come back and be saying, I've been here for 40 years. Instead of saying I've been here for 24 years, I'm starting to say that I've been here my whole life, all my years. And that perspective is maybe not as experienced in trials and tribulations as some older generations, but it still provides some insight that I think I would personally like to see at political levels, all the way through. I guess on a personal note, is it up to me to kind of spearhead that opinion that I hold to change things? Maybe. But for now, I'm happy doing my job at Toi Moana, and it's been fun. Kia ora.
Scott.
That was very interesting, and I'm most impressed with the fact that you've taken in your tree of knowledge, wide roots, because you meet lots of people with different perspectives, and that hopefully make you think. Hey, what I'm really interested to know is that you enjoyed your mapping, and it can be an area that's quite sensitive. So what challenges did you find when you were mapping? Because was it particularly around Marae, or was what?
It was mapping. You're right. It is a typical difficult subject. Mapping that I was looking in is focused on Te Ao Māori values, and the range and the scope that it holds. There is a weird kind of battle you have to have where, especially if I'm talking about physically drawing dots on a satellite map, that is a more linear, systematic way of jotting down data and information that isn't as incorporative to a Te Ao Māori worldview and how things change relating to different aspects in the environment. The biggest question that was always faced to me in sociology was, are humans, or was talked about earlier as well, do humans react to the environment, or do we change the environment? So do humans change to the environment, or do we change the environment? And in terms of mapping and stuff, I find it interesting that we're trying to put down data and sets of ways of thinking and models and frameworks that change the environment. And whereas it would be an interesting avenue where we start mapping where the environment is affecting us. As far as logistically doing that, it's a very technical, coding issues and all that, but there is a few issues that are fundamental with mapping, and I'm sure there's advances, or I know there is advances in changing ways we're mapping even within Toi Moana, talking with spatial teams and stuff at lunchtime. But yeah, it's very fun, very challenging, and also quite a nice avenue to learn about the land as well. Yeah.
Do you have any other questions? Okay. Just from me, I just want to thank you for your presentation this morning. There is a question I'd like to ask, and I probably need to ask Kat, and that is, listening to your kōrero, what I see as an advantage is maybe moving forward with some of our students that come in, is maybe looking at secondments into hapu iwi camps and talking about the work that you do and some of the challenges that you face, and also the challenges faced by tangata whenua. And I see you as a resource as well that can help in the whole thing about building capacity for hapu iwi. And interestingly enough, what you're talking about with the mapping and the challenges you have for what does that mapping look like from a Te Ao Māori perspective, and how does that help you with the challenges that you've actually put to us, that information that you're requiring to find the solution that you're asking for, the mapping, is maybe not in-house, but maybe if you sat and we seconded you into runanga organisations, that kind of helps to start closing the gaps and drawing together the dots that you're talking about in your delivery. So maybe that's something we need to talk about with our students, is seconding them into those positions to doing follow-up work that you're talking about. But yeah, as expressed by everybody, thanks for your presentation this morning. Excellent. I'll hand back to you, Herewini.
Just an apology, Madam Chair. Our other student, unfortunately, there's been some issues with IT and won't be able to join us on Zoom. And so we did have one final presentation, which was the video. One student had their feedback videoed. If the table wanted to do that now, or if in the interest of time, we could share that. It's in your hands, Madam Chair.
I'll go with that.
So we will go with the recording. Okay. Sorry, can we have that, please? Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Patricia Waugh, who was our Rotorua-based student. She worked partly on secondment. Part of her time was seconded to support one of the iwi IMP developments, iwi management plans. And so she's going to speak to some experience working jointly for us, but dedicating some of her time to that support and working with iwi.
Tēnā tātou, ko Patricia tōku ingoa, he uri ahau no Ngāti Pikiao. Hello everyone, my name is Patricia and I whakapapa to Ngāti Pikiao. I am currently completing a Bachelor of Laws conjoint with a Bachelor of Science, double majoring in Environmental Studies and Māori Resource Management. And this year I will be heading into my third year of study. This summer I had the privilege of being a summer assistant here at Regional Council with Te Amorangi. So I was seconded to Ngāti Pikiao to assist in updating their iwi management plan, creating a freshwater management plan, and also establishing a mana whakahono between Regional Council and the iwi. So this mahi involved a lot of research of iwi information, reviewing of all of the current documents that we have within the iwi, and also the collation of this information into one space. And because of the extent that these planning documents could include, I was researching and familiarising myself with the teams and processes that occur here at Regional Council, which I'm extremely grateful for, and not just because of the knowledge, but because I was able to appreciate the work that everyone does here. So I've been based in the Rotorua office, and working with Te Amorangi has been amazing. I will definitely miss everyone here. The team have been extremely supportive throughout this entire internship, and I'm, again, extremely grateful for everyone. Ngā mihi nunui kia koutou. Kia ora.
So again, through you, Madam Chair, just to pick up again on that point you raised, internally we do have a program being explored at the moment around that secondment opportunity, both in terms of our staff being seconded out potentially and others coming in to work alongside our staff, what they may look like. So that is a project that is being led internally and shaped up around how that might operate and the value that would flow both ways from that. That's internal resource hub. But if there are any questions on the report, happy to take those, Madam Chair.
Just on that secondment, so how does that work? Is that sort of a co-funded project or something, is it? Or is it co-based? How does it, what's the practicalities of it?
Madam Chair, that's what's being explored at the moment. The direction is, the starting point is obviously the direction the Resource Hub have had is that it is a fiscally neutral starting point, but there are opportunities to temper some of that depending on what it is. For example, we have a big push around building partnerships with iwi in that iwi management space. So is there an opportunity where we can work through that partnership to do some of that work? Does that offset the cost and stuff like that? So it's being worked through at the moment, and there's a presentation going to the senior leadership team about what that may look like and exploring all different options. So yeah, but that is the initial premise is around that cost neutrality.
Madam Chair. Yeah, sorry, just finally, just to add to the conversation around internships, the Wahapua Waihe, we had 10 students intern over a 10-week, over the holiday period. And they were paid accordingly through the funding that iwi had participated in the budget. But they worked with the Terra Carbon group and then the other monitoring groups and the research teams in the field. And they were last year students at high school or first year students studying environmental matters at university. So that internship program worked really, really well. And as the interim chair for Te Wahapū, I signed off some certificates of completion. And the respect shown from the researchers, the international researchers, to the team and to the project was very, very strong. And I think it just highlights the capability that's building and the interest that's building and attracting a lot of our young people into this type of space. So the value that we get from a regional council and participating in these things and building capability, there's huge value in that. So we can talk about the fiscal responsibilities, and I agree, where we can get that value, capitalized in the context of the value that they give in terms of the learning experiences and the relationships is huge. So I just wanted to add that to the mix of internships that we have been involved with as a council and acquiring, that appreciation that was expressed up there on the screen for Toi Moana's support, which just helps to showcase, Toi Moana again in a leadership space around how we attract and support this type of development capacity building in this particular case amongst the iwi. And I'm sure that there is that happening as well, because I know the internships that are offered to the community wide as well. So this is all really, really great stuff. I'm highly interested in how we build that next generation's capacity to take over from the conversations that we have at this level, given, I guess the aging population around this table. It's nice to know, is what I'm saying, that there is this bevy of cohorts coming through who are really, really appreciative of the support given, but also the journey that we are on in terms of improving our environmental settings. So just wanted to make that comment. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor White. And I'd just like to add to that too. I don't know whether how many of you are on social media, but I do follow the social media of Dr. Kurapol Burke, and she has highlighted the number of students that she has had on her program. As far as, she's covering the Hauraki area as well, not just the Toi Moana. So her reach has gone beyond Toi Moana in teaching the younger generation in that whole marine biology study space. So it's quite admirable that we play yet a small part in that. And maybe, something we should be looking at in the LTP is extending the budget that we actually provide in supporting these summer students. But certainly food for thought for us to maybe build a pool where we're supporting summer students. On that note, I will look for a mover and seconder for this report. Thank you, Councillor Thurston, second by Councillor McMillan. All those in favour say aye. Those against, thank you. That brings us to a close to our meeting, councillors. So if I can turn to you, please, Councillor White, to close our meeting. That will be the end of our meeting today.
Tātou, e mi ana ki a koutou anō. Tūtoa mai I runga, tūtoa mai I raro, tūtoa mai waho, tūtoa mai I roto. Ke taua e te Māori, tū te Māori ora ki te katoa. Haumi e, hui e.